friends. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd. It's actually Earth Day. So I just want to wish everyone a happy Earth Day. And it's day 35 of missing my kiddos. So not cool. I'd like to give a shout out to Santana, Madison, Jesse, Hilla, Faith, Atalia, and Edwida for joining me today for our Zoom. And we're going to start doing Zoom at least Mondays and Wednesdays. I forgot Fridays might not work for me, but we're going to try to pick it up a little bit and do a little more together. Okay, so still reading Ribsy by Beverly Cleary. And again, I don't own the rights to these books, but sure do love them. And I'm grateful that she lets us read them. So chapter 7, Ribsy and the Apartment House. Henry pressed the phone against his ear as hard as he could. He heard a lot of barking, and then he heard Joe yell, "What did you let him go for? There's a reward for him, $10 whole." There was an answer in a girl's voice, which Henry could not catch, the sound of thumping feet, and then nothing but the sound of a television set tuned to a program with a lot of shooting, which his parents would not let him watch. "I don't get it," said Henry to his mother and father. Oh, I've got my window open and the blinds are moving. Who had been following his side of the conversation. There was a lot of barking, and now there isn't anyone on the line. "Anybody home?" he asked into the telephone in a loud voice. There was no answer, only gunfire from the TV set. "Well, hang on a minute and see what happens," said Mr. Huggins. "Now that we're this close to Ribsy, we can't let him get away." Henry strained to catch any sound that might come through the phone. He heard barks that grew fainter, yelling, arguing, and finally a click, as someone on the Sailor household side replaced the telephone receiver. That click was as final as a period at the end of a sentence. Slowly, he replaced the receiver. He thought a moment and then said, "Well, at least Ribsy recognized me. That's something." When Ribsy could run no more, he flopped down on the sidewalk in the dark to pant. As soon as he had caught his breath, he got up again and started off at a brisk trot with his nose to the ground. The trouble was he didn't know where he was going. It was also puzzling. He had heard Henry Huggins' voice, but he couldn't find Henry. He stopped and barked, thinking that Henry would call, but when there was no answer, he continued his search, hoping his nose would guide him. The sidewalk gave Ribsy the scent of many people and a variety of dogs and of a cat or two, but it did not give him the scent of Henry. Ribsy became tired, confused, and bewildered. Late that night, he gave up looking for Henry, and he went to sleep on the cold concrete in front of the Coffee Cup Cafe, where the lingering smell of hamburgers, fried during the day, gave him some comfort. Oh man, I miss hamburgers. Early the next morning, Ribsy woke up, feeling stiff and hungry. The Coffee Cup Cafe was not open, so he walked around to the back door, where he found a garbage can that smelled interesting. It must have smelled interesting to some other dog, too, because the can had been tipped over and garbage was strewn all around the ground. Ribsy helped himself to some bits of bun, which were smeared with more relish than he cared for. He also ate the remains of a piece of pie. The best garbage had already been eaten, but at least his stomach was no longer completely empty. Ribsy wandered aimlessly around the neighborhood, which did not look at all like Klickitat Street with its green lawns and white houses surrounded by shrubbery. There was very little grass in this neighborhood and not many bushes, although there were a number of fire hydrants. Many of the buildings came right up to the sidewalk, and most of them were of brick and were 3 or 4 stories high. It was in front of one of these buildings that Ribsy first saw the boy with the tennis ball. He was a thin boy, somewhat round-shouldered, who was sitting on the front steps tossing the ball from one hand to the other. Naturally, Ribsy was interested in a boy with a tennis ball. While Ribsy was watching the boy, a young woman came out of the apartment house. She was wearing a black coat over the starched dress and apron of a waitress. "Now see here, Larry Biggerstaff," she said. "You keep out of trouble today, you hear?" "Yeah, Mom." Larry stopped tossing the ball. Ribsy decided he did not like the smell of this woman. It reminded him of the violet bubble bath. "I don't want to hear any more complaints from the manager about you," continued his mother. "Last Saturday, Mrs. Creech complained that you played a mouth organ in the hall, bounced a ball so that it disturbed the lady downstairs, and tried to climb down the fire escape. Keep it up, and you'll get us evicted. And then where will we go?" So a mouth organ, do you remember that one when Ramona would play it? It was the harmonica. Larry heaved a big sigh to show that he was disgusted with the whole situation. But Mom, there's nothing to do. I don't even have a good ball to take to the playground. Well, I don't have money to buy balls, said his mother. At noon, you come to the cafe and get your lunch. In the meantime, keep out of trouble. She left the apartment house and hurried down the street toward the Coffee Cup Cafe. Larry began to bounce the tennis ball, which was old and it had lost much of its life. He had to throw it down really hard to make it bounce at all. Nevertheless, the sight was a stimulating one to Ribsy. He pranced right up to Larry and wagged his tail to show he was ready to play. But Larry didn't understand. Go away, you old dog, he said crossly and muttered. I don't even have a good ball. This boy needed educating. Ribsy barked to tell him that here was a dog ready to play with the tennis ball. Larry backed away. Ribsy wagged his tail and looked eager. But that only made Larry cautious. Plainly, Ribsy would have to show this boy how to play. He bowed before Larry, ran off a little way, and then came dashing back. Larry dropped the ball, and Ribsy picked it up. Give me back my ball, said Larry. Ribsy dropped the ball and stood over it, wagging his tail. Cautiously, Larry advanced toward the ball, but when he was about to pick it up, Ribsy grabbed it in his jaws and went racing up the street. Hey! Yelled Larry. Ribsy raced back, dropped the ball at Larry's feet, and stood waving his tail and looking hopefully up at the boy. Well, thanks, pal, said Larry, surprised and pleased. Woof, answered Ribsy. Oh, the boy finally understood. He threw the ball down the street, and Ribsy bounded after it, darting between the people who were walking along the sidewalk and catching it on the first bounce. He was delighted. So was Larry. The boy threw the ball again and again for Ribsy to retrieve. Finally, Larry sat down on the front steps of the apartment house, and Ribsy threw himself down at his feet to pant. You're a pretty nice dog, remarked Larry. I'd sure like to keep you, but old Lady Creech would never let me. Ribsy laid his nose on his paws and looked up at Larry, who returned Ribsy's gaze. Are you hungry? Larry asked. Ribsy thumped his tail on the sidewalk. He liked having a boy talk to him. Larry liked having a dog to talk to. If you were a big cross dog, like me, I bet old Lady Creech would stop yelling at me. She'd be scared to yell if I had a big dog following me around. Ribsy rolled over on his back and allowed Larry to rub his tummy for him. You wait here, said Larry. No, that wouldn't work. You might run off while I was getting you something to eat. Can you be real quiet? Again, Ribsy thumped his tail. Come on then, I'll get you some cornflakes or a hot dog or something, said Larry, and pulled a key out of his pocket. Ribsy followed him up the stairs, and Larry unlocked the front door. Inside, he tiptoed past the door of the apartment occupied by the manager of the building to an old-fashioned elevator. Ribsy was ready to enjoy this new game the boy was playing. Larry opened a glass door and folded back a metal gate, and Ribsy followed him into what appeared to be a really small, square room with no windows. Larry closed the gate and the door and pushed a button on the wall. So he's in an elevator, but it's just so old-fashioned that it's really hard to even picture what it looks like. There was a whirring noise, and suddenly Ribsy had a feeling that he had never felt before. He felt as if he was going up while his stomach stayed down. He didn't like this feeling one bit. He did not like this strange little room. He wanted out right now. He began to bark. Shh! Larry seemed upset about something because he scowled and grabbed at Ribsy. Shh! She'll hear you! The manager had already heard. A door on the first floor flew open, and a woman's cross voice called up, Larry Biggerstaff, you get that dog out of this building at once! It was the kind of voice that could make a dog slink away feeling guilty. By that time, the little room had stopped at the second floor. Larry slid back the gate and opened the glass door. Before he stepped out, he whispered, You stay right here. I'll come back and get you in a minute. Then he left the frightened dog and shut him in the little room, the elevator. Ribsy did not know what to do. He did not want to stay in the little room all alone, but there was no way he could even get out. He was even afraid to bark, so he just made little anxious noises. Suddenly, he felt himself beginning to rise again, while his stomach seemed to stay behind. He barked for Larry to come and get him out of this place, but all he heard was the whir of machinery and the thump of Larry's sneakers running downstairs. As the elevator stopped on the 3rd floor and his stomach caught up, Ribsy heard Larry's frightened voice coming up the elevator shaft from the 1st floor. "Dog? What dog?" he was saying. "I don't have a dog." I cannot even turn these pages. "Don't you lie to me," the manager said. "I know there's a dog in this building." "It's not my dog," said Larry. Upstairs, a woman opened the door and pushed back the gate. "Hello," said the woman to Ribsy, as if she met dogs in elevators every day. "How did you manage to press the button?" This time, Ribsy was taking no chance of being left in this frightening room that made him lose his stomach. He dashed past the woman and into the 3rd floor hall while the door of the elevator closed behind him. Now, he did not know what to do. He was in a long hall with a strip of worn carpet down the center and doors on either side. At one side of the hall was a staircase, and at the end of the hall was a window with a fire escape sign over it. Nothing looked familiar to Ribsy, who had never been in an apartment house before. Larry's voice came up the stairwell. "I don't have a dog." Ribsy didn't. The only thing he could think of. He started down the stairs toward Larry's voice. "Young man," said Mrs. Creech, "you took a dog in that elevator. You can't fool me." Ribsy hesitated. He did not like this woman's voice. It reminded him of too many voices that had yelled, "Get off my lawn," to him. Sometimes voices like this were accompanied by a rock or a clod of dirt. And here's Ribsy completely befuddled, has no idea where he is or what to do. Ribsy heard the elevator door open down on the 1st floor, and the manager say in a very different voice, "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Berg. I was looking for a dog in the elevator." "There's no dog in the elevator," said Mrs. Berg, who was a friend of Larry's and who understood the situation. "I have come to pay my rent." "Certainly," said the manager. "Just step into my apartment while I write your receipt." Ribsy stood listening at the steps, but all he heard was the elevator door close and the machinery whir. As the elevator rose, Ribsy started cautiously down the steps. He did not know what to expect in this strange building where rooms went up in the air. The 2nd floor looked exactly like the 3rd, which Ribsy had just left. The same strip of carpet, same doors on either side, same window with a sign over it at the end of the hall. Ribsy felt confused. He was even more confused when he heard a whispered "Psst." It was Larry, who was supposed to be down below, but now he was up above. While Ribsy had walked down to the 2nd floor, Larry had ridden up to the 3rd. "Woof," answered Ribsy, who wanted to get out of this place. "Shh." Larry's worried face appeared in the stairwell above Ribsy. He came tiptoeing down the steps. "I've got to get you out of here," he whispered. "Come on." He started to lead Ribsy on down the steps when the door of the manager's apartment opened on the 1st floor. "Thank you, Mrs. Berg," the manager was saying. "We can't go down that way," whispered Larry. "Come on, this way." Ribsy obeyed because he didn't know where to go by himself and because he wanted to stay away from the woman with the angry voice. Larry led him down the hall toward the back stairs, which were near the window with the sign over it. He was about to start down with Ribsy when he heard someone coming up. "I don't know who it is, but I'm not taking any chances," Larry muttered, looking around wildly. He saw the window at the end of the hall and opened it. Ribsy found himself being picked up, thrust through the window, and dropped onto the fire escape. The window was closed behind him and a curtain pulled. Ribsy's feet slid through the metal bars of the fire escape and they stuck down in empty space. So here's the bar. And when he was dropped, he just went poof. So his feet are hanging down, but his tummy's resting on the bar. Poor Ribsy, that's a horrible thing. He doesn't know what's going on there. Well, if an elevator was a strange place, a fire escape was much, much worse. Ribsy felt as if he should be falling, but instead, there he hung in midair. Inside, he heard the manager's angry voice, which made him feel as if he had done something he shouldn't, but he could not understand what it was. Silently, he struggled to get all 4 of his feet up onto the little metal bars of the fire escape. Ribsy soon discovered that a fire escape was not only frightening, it was uncomfortable. He had to move his feet very carefully on the cold metal, or they would slip through. It made him uneasy to see the ground so far below. There was an opening in the fire escape big enough to jump through, but the ground was too far down. Since Ribsy could not go down, he did the next best thing. He went up. Because he was an optimistic dog, he hoped things might be better up there. He climbed up cautiously, one step on the steep, slanting ladder at a time. Unfortunately, when he reached the next level of the fire escape, things were worse. The good solid ground was much farther away. Ribsy peered into the window, but the third-floor hall was empty. With his tail drooping, Ribsy looked around. Well, the view was better, but there was nothing a dog would be glad to see, only some old fenders and wrecked cars behind the body and fender shop below. He could look out over the roof of the shop and see the cars and buses on the busy street on the other side of the block. He tried whimpering at the window, but no one came. He gave an experimental bark, but there was so much banging in the body and fender shop that nobody heard him. Bewildered and frightened, Ribsy lay down on the fire escape as best as he could. The cold metal bars pressed into his little body, and the breezes blew under him as well as over him. Nothing was comfortable. Nothing was familiar. He felt more lost than he had ever felt before. There was nothing to do but just lie there on the fire escape, watching the traffic and listening to the banging in the body and fender shop, and wait for things to get better. A half an hour went by, and then an hour. Larry did not come back, and the building was silent because the apartments overlooking the body and fender shop were rented to people who were out all day and did not have to listen to the noise. Ribsy grew cold and stiff. His body hurt from the iron bars that pressed into him. Things were not getting any better. Ribsy would have to do something. Ribsy got up and managed to shake himself without having his feet slip through the fire escape. Cautiously, he put one forepaw and then the other on the window ledge once more and whimpered at the empty hall. The doors remained closed. No rescuer appeared. Ribsy became impatient. He barked. Still no one came to rescue him. No one cared about the dog on the fire escape. He was forgotten. Ribsy turned around carefully and barked through the railing toward the traffic on the next street. The only answer he got was the banging in the body and fender shop below. Ribsy walked gingerly, which means like really carefully, around the fire escape to make sure he had not missed a way out. There were only the ladder-like steps, and while he had not minded climbing up, they were much too steep to go down. Ribsy became frantic. He felt as if the whole world had gone off and left him. He barked and barked and barked. There must be somebody, someplace who would come and get him off this thing. And there was somebody. Somebody way down below on the next street. Ribsy! It was Henry Huggins' voice coming from the new station wagon, which was moving along with the rest of the traffic. Ribsy! Henry had his head out of the window and was pointing up at the fire escape. Oh, dear gravy. Sorry about that. Alarm going off. At the sound of the voice he loved, Ribsy went wild. He barked until he was hoarse. In his excitement, his hind feet slipped through the fire escape. Terrified lest he fall through, he scrambled frantically to regain his footing on the metal bars. When his feet were planted safely once more, there was no sign of Henry anywhere. This terrified Ribsy even more. Henry had gone off and left him again? He barked so hoarsely and so wildly that even the body and fender men heard him. One of them came to the back door of the shop and looked up at the dog on the fire escape. Huh! Well, I'll be doggone, he said, pushing his greasy cap back on his head. How did you get up there? Ribsy whimpered anxiously. He felt better just having somebody talk to him. Hey, Bert! The body and fender man called to somebody in the shop. There's a dog on the fire escape. No kidding? Bert appeared and looked up at Ribsy. Well, what do you know? How do you suppose he got up there? Ribsy tried to tell the man that he had to get down, that he had to run down the street and find Henry Huggins before he got so far away he could never find him again. What do you think we should do? Asked the body and fender man. Bert shrugged. Probably some kid put him up there. Most likely it was Larry. He'll probably get him down again. Yeah, I guess you're right. The two men knew Larry, who often came into the shop to admire the wrecked cars. Suddenly, Ribsy saw Henry Huggins appear from around the side of the building. "Ribsy!" the boy shouted. "I found you!" This time, Ribsy barked for joy at the sight of the boy down below. "Funny place to lose a dog," remarked the body and fender man. "I didn't lose him there," explained Henry, with his eyes on his dog. "I lost him a month ago at the shopping center." "Then what's he doing up there?" said the man. "Search me," said Henry. All that really mattered was that he had found his dog at last. "All I know is I was talking to him on the phone and he started running and nobody saw him after that." The two men looked at each other, shook their heads, and turned to go back into the shop. One of them said something that sounded like, "Poor kid, too much TV." The other one said, "Yeah, my boy watches those talking animal programs too, but he's too smart to believe them." Next, Ribsy saw Henry's mother and father come around the corner of the apartment house. "Oh, I finally found a parking space," remarked Mr. Huggins, and looked up at Ribsy. "Hello there, fellow." Ribsy made eager, anxious noises. Surely his family would not go off and leave him here. "See, Dad," said Henry, "I told you if we just drove around in this neighborhood, we were sure to find him. I told you he wouldn't be too far from that Joe's house." "You were right," said his mother. "And now we don't have to argue with that boy Joe about who owns him. How on earth do you suppose he got up there?" Ribsy whimpered again to remind Henry he would like to get off this thing. "What worries me is how we're going to get him down," said Henry. By this time, Larry Biggerstaff arrived. He had been sitting on the front steps worrying about how he was going to get rid of the dog when he had noticed three people hurry down the side of his apartment building and had overheard the words "dog" and "fire escape." "That's easy," Mr. Huggins was saying. "I'll just go ring the bell and tell the manager we want our dog back." "Oh, please don't do that," begged Larry, bursting in the conversation. "The dog isn't supposed to be there, and I'll catch it if the manager finds out about him. She might even evict me and my mother like she's always saying she's going to do." Ribsy barked to remind the people below that, "Hello, I'm still up here." "Shh!" hissed Larry. "I don't get it," said Henry. "What is he doing up there?" "Well, I was playing out in front with this old tennis ball that I have." From the way Larry spoke of the tennis ball, it was easy to tell he did not think much of it. "This dog came along and wanted to chase it. Well, I got to thinking he might be hungry, and so I started to take him inside, and the manager started chasing me, and I shoved him out on the fire escape to hide him. And, well, I've been sitting out in the front steps trying to figure out how I was going to get rid of him without the manager seeing me." "I see," said Mr. Huggins. "Well, just get him down," said Henry. "Fast." "Now, Henry," said his mother. "I didn't put him on the third floor," said Larry, as if this helped the situation. "I put him on the second floor, and he climbed up to the third." Ribsy was so eager to get down, he put a paw on the ladder-like steps. He could not do it. They were too steep, and he was afraid. "Well, we seem to have a problem," said Mr. Huggins, looking up at the dog on the fire escape. "Maybe you could boost me up with that little ladder that sticks down from the bottom part, and then I could climb up and carry him down," offered Larry, who was so glad somebody had arrived to help him with his problem. "Oh, no," said Mrs. Huggins hastily. "He couldn't let you climb down those steps. No, we couldn't let you climb down those steps. With a dog, you might slip." Ribsy could not be patient any longer. He put his paw on the top step again. And so if you're trying to picture what this looks like, this is a picture I took in New York a bunch of years ago. But this is the fire escape. So Ribsy would be like right here on the third floor. And he has to go down. It really is a ladder. So he has to go down that, and that's too hard for a dog. Well, most dogs, I would think. Anyway, that was a picture I took a while ago. Oh, dearie dear. Sorry, now I lost my spot. Okay. "Maybe we could call the fire department, and they could bring a net, and he could jump," suggested Henry. "Oh, don't do that. Please don't do that," Larry objected strenuously. "The manager really gets excited when she sees a fire engine in front of the building." Ribsy was beginning to think the people below had forgotten all about him. He put a second paw on the steps. He wanted so much to get down. He wanted to feel Henry petting him again and to lick his face. Even though he was afraid, he was going to try. "This is ridiculous," said Mr. Huggins. "I'll just go in the back door and up the back steps and bring him in through the window." "And have someone think you're a burglar?" asked Mrs. Huggins. "Oh, no. You go Henry said to Larry. You got him up there. Larry looked frightened. The manager might catch me. Then I'll go, said Henry. Ribsy reached for the second step. At the same time, he brought down his hind feet on the top step. No, you won't, said Henry's mother. You cannot go roaming around in a strange building. Well, we can't just leave him, Henry began. Ribsy had started down the steep steps. It was too late to turn back, even if he wanted to, and he didn't want to. He found himself coming down the steps much faster than he expected. The metal was slippery to his paws. Ribsy, halfway down, he slipped and he tumbled, yelping, to the bottom. And there he was, with his feet dangling in space again. Poor Ribsy. So now, well, I'll show you in a picture in a minute. Another picture. Hey, look! Henry pointed unnecessarily because everyone was looking at Ribsy. He got down by himself. That proves he wants to come home with us. Ribsy picked himself up and scrambled around trying to find places to put his feet. So now Ribsy's on this floor. You can see him right there. He's like, what am I going to do? Oh boy, I think I lost my spot again. Oh, did you hurt yourself, Ribsy? Henry asked. Ribsy managed to set his feet on the slats of the fire escape. Woof, he said, and wagged his tail to show he was still all right. Smart dog, Ribsy, said Henry. Now how do we get him down from there? The two men from the body and fender shop came out once more to see what all the commotion was about. I hear that dog talks on the telephone, remarked Bert. Well, he did once, said Mr. Huggins, absent-mindedly. He was wondering how they were going to get Ribsy down to the ground. The two men exchanged a glance. Well, there's a ladder in the shop that should reach almost the bottom of the fire escape, one of them said. I'll go get it. He returned in a moment with a paint-splattered stepladder, which he set up under the fire escape. It almost reached the metal ladder that extended down from the fire escape. I'll go, Dad, said Henry, eager to get his hands on his dog again. No, you'd better let me go, said his father, mounting the stepladder. With help so near, Ribsy barked joyfully. Shh, hissed Larry. Mr. Huggins climbed a stepladder and then a short ladder that was part of the fire escape. He crawled through the opening in the lower level of the fire escape and picked up Ribsy. Hold still, boy, he said, as Ribsy gratefully tried to lick his face. Oh, you're going to fall, said Mrs. Huggins. You can't possibly climb down the fire escape ladder and the step ladder with a dog. Oh, don't drop him, begged Henry. I'm afraid that's what I'll have to do, said Mr. Huggins. Go ahead, said one of the body and fender men. We'll catch him. Ribsy felt himself being lifted over the railing of the fire escape, and then he experienced a terrible moment of panic as he was dropped. He fell through the air, but suddenly everything was all right. 4 strong hands caught him. Ribsy wriggled out of the grasp of the body and fender men and sprang into Henry's arms, and where he licked Henry's face for joy. Ribsy, said Henry. Ribsy, old boy. He put the dog down at last. And Ribsy was so happy. He waggled all over. Henry sank to his knees and hugged his dog. Whew, that's a relief, said Larry. Mr. Huggins reached into his pocket and brought out his wallet. I think part of the reward money should be yours, he said to Larry. What for? Larry looked suspiciously at Henry's father as if he thought he might be joking. I didn't do anything. Well, you put him up where we could see him, said Mr. Huggins, and he held out 3 $1 bills. If you hadn't put him up on the fire escape, we could have driven around all day without seeing him. Larry looked doubtfully at the bills. Sure, said Henry. You put him up there in plain sight. Larry took the 3 bills. Thanks. I can buy a good ball with this. He grinned at Mr. Huggins and at Henry, and then he patted Ribsy. Ribsy was so happy he wriggled all over for Larry, too. And now I think we better go home before Larry's manager catches us, said Mr. Huggins, as the men took down the ladder and carried it into the body and fender shop. I wonder if that dog knows how to dial the phone, too, remarked Bert. If he does, he ought to be on TV, answered the other man. Henry, his parents, and Larry walked along the side of the apartment house with Ribsy bounding along beside them. In front of the building, they ran into Mrs. Creech, who was sweeping the front steps. I knew you had a dog, Larry Biggerstaff, she said triumphantly. Wait till I talk to your mother about this. No, there must be some mistake, said Mr. Huggins politely. This is our dog. He never belonged to Larry. But, began Mrs. Creech. No, said Mr. Huggins firmly. The dog is ours, and has been for several years. We just misplaced him for a while." Mrs. Creech did not know what to say, so she went back to sweeping the steps. Henry opened the door of the station wagon, which still smelled like a new car. "Hop in," he said to Ribsy. Ribsy accepted the invitation. He jumped in and settled himself on the seat. This time he knew he was welcome. Henry climbed in beside him. He picked up the leather collar which was lying on the seat and fastened it around Ribsy's neck. Ribsy thumped his tail on the upholstery. Mrs. Huggins smiled at Ribsy and did not say a word. Ribsy could ride in the new station wagon all he wanted to. The end. I hope you enjoyed all of these books. This was actually the last one. I do have other books by Beverly Cleary. I'll probably start the Mouse and the Motorcycle books. They're good, and because it's her writing, because, you know, she's amazing. But that was the last book of the series that we've been kind of reading for all year. So I hope you guys are staying safe, staying home, still doing Zoom. We're going to try to do it more than once a week. So love you guys. Take care. Bye.